Wrathborn of the Sapphire Steppe. The dropship's hull burned a trail of fire across the heavens. Sergeant Kale Rylan was pinned in the pilot's seat, every muscle locked against the crushing force of atmospheric entry. His Titan frame augmentations kept his bones from snapping, but barely. Warning symbols cascaded in red waves across the visor. Stabilizers offline, the ship's AI sputtered, voice glitching. Trajectory, terminal. "Tell me something I don't know," Kale muttered. Through the cracked viewport, the planet below unfurled like a painting come alive. The world was blue. Not blue like water or sky, but blue like flame. The Sapphire Steppe stretched to the horizon in shimmering, rippling waves, tall grasses glowing with bioluminescent veins that caught the light of two suns, a golden giant and a pale ice-blue companion. Crystal formations jutted from the plains like jagged spears of glass, refracting sunlight into rainbows that danced across the landscape with every gust of wind. Even through the mayhem of descent, Kale's breath caught. "It's beautiful." The AI tried to reply, but its voice collapsed into static as the ship tore through a thermal column. Fire licked across the hull. Metal screamed. Kale's vision blurred. The world rose to meet him. Impact. A deafening crash, then silence. For a long moment, Kale lay motionless, staring up through the shattered viewport at drifting smoke, and beyond it, the twin suns shining in an alien sky. Finally, he forced himself upright. The cockpit was a graveyard of sparking wires and shredded plating. Ash hung in the air like a thin fog. He shoved debris aside and stumbled into the open air. His boots sank into the tall, glowing grass. It whispered around him, brushing against his armor with a sound like wind chimes. The blue strands shimmered as though infused with faint starlight, releasing tiny motes of luminescence with every disturbance. The scent was crisp, somewhere between pine, ozone, and crushed mint. He slowly turned in a full circle. The Sapphire Steppe went on forever, rolling plains alive with motion. Herds of long-legged grazers moved in loose patterns, shimmering manes catching the sun's glow. Far in the distance, towering shapes marched across the horizon. Massive, placid creatures with backs like moving hills, their calls echoing like deep bells. Kale's visor scanned automatically. Terenas, unknown class. Atmosphere oxygen-rich. Microflora luminescent. Wildlife variable. No signs of Earth origin technology within detectable range. The last line hit harder than he expected. "Great," he murmured. "No help, no signal, no home." The dropship behind him was a twisted ruin, half buried in a furrow carved hundreds of meters long. Smoke trailed from the ruptured engines, panels hung loose. The beacon, his only hope of signaling Earth command, was crushed beneath collapsed plating. Repairable? Maybe. But not today. Maybe not ever. The world around him descended into darkness as the adrenaline that had been coursing through him finally subsided. Even Deathworlders, it seems, are not immune to exhaustion. Kale inhaled slowly, letting the alien wind fill his lungs. He was alive. He was alone. He was stranded. And then he heard them, the hoofbeats. Not frantic, not charging. Measured, deliberate, circling. Kale turned toward the sound. Figures emerged from the tall grass, mounted riders atop elegant, antlered beasts with fur like storm clouds and eyes like molten silver. The riders themselves were lithe, bronze-skinned, clad in layered cloth dyed in shades of blue and white. Their faces bore markings, paint or tattoo, he couldn't tell, spirals and lines that shimmered faintly in the light. Their eyes were the most striking, silver, reflective, like polished metal. They did not raise weapons immediately. They simply observed him. One rider urged her mount forward. She was tall, regal, even beneath dust and travel wear, wearing a cloak that shimmered like woven moonlight. She spoke. "Starfallen one, what purpose brings you to the Sapphire Steppe?" Kale opened his mouth, then realized he had no real answer. "I crashed," the riders murmured among themselves. The tall woman considered him carefully, gaze lingering on his armor, his build, the scorch marks of violent descent. "We will bring you to our elder seer," she said, "for only she may read the meaning of your arrival." Kale lifted his hands slowly, non-threatening. "I just need salvage," he said. "And time." "Time," she repeated softly. "Yes, you will need much of that." The riders formed a loose escort around him, not hostile, not friendly, simply watchful. As they began leading him across the shimmering plain, Kale took one last look at his ruined dropship. Smoke curled upward into the endless blue. I'll come back for you, he promised silently. Then he followed the riders into the heart of Terenas. Their journey took hours. The Sapphire Steppe changed subtly the farther they traveled. The blue grass grew taller, almost reaching Kale's shoulders. Crystal outcroppings dotted the land like clusters of frozen lightning. Insects with translucent wings flickered through the air, leaving trails of glittering dust behind them. The mounts, called talkun, he learned, moved with an elegant, bounding gait, their cloven hooves barely bending the grass. Their antlers curved back like finely carved bone, luminous veins running through them. The lead rider finally offered her name, Rhyla. Her voice carried a melodic cadence, firm but not unkind. You walk with the stride of a warborn, she observed, studying his movements. Your steps are too heavy for the grass, yet it bends without breaking beneath you. Curious. Kale's brow rose. You're analyzing my gait? It tells much about a man. She glanced over her shoulder at him. Especially one fallen from the sky. Kale exhaled. I'm a soldier, nothing more. On Terenas, Rhyla said, nothing is nothing more. The settlement appeared as the suns dipped lower, a sprawling camp of shimmering tents arranged in concentric circles around a tall central spire made of living crystal. Children chased each other between fire pits. Hunters sharpened spearheads carved from translucent crystal. Elders wove luminous strands of steppe grass into patterned cloth. The air smelled of roasted meat, spiced roots, and the cool scent of the endless plains. Every gaze followed Kale. Some eyes held curiosity, others, caution. A few, fear. Titan-framed soldiers were larger than most humans, but among the slender nomads, Kale looked like something from a dream or nightmare. Rhyla dismounted and motioned for him to follow her toward the central tent, vast, domed, woven from layered cloth that shimmered with shifting iridescence. Inside sat the elder seer Jatora, her face painted in silver spirals, her hair braided with strands of glowing grass. A crystal staff rested against her knee, humming softly. Her voice was aged but strong. Walk forward, star-fallen one. Kale approached cautiously. The elder seer studied him for a long, silent moment. Her eyes, pale as mist, reflected not just his form, but his exhaustion, his weariness, his grief at being stranded. You have traveled far, she murmured, farther than even the Vrax once dared. Kale stiffened. I've heard that word twice now. Who are they? Jatora's expression darkened. The sky tyrants, scaled ones, slavers that fell upon our world generations ago. They vanished for a time, but the wind whispers of their return. Kale frowned. What do they want? Everything. The elder seer touched her staff to the ground, and they take it. He felt a chill ripple down his spine. He had seen the aftermath of slavers on other worlds. Too many. I'm not here to get involved, Kale said quietly. I need to fix my ship, then I leave. The elder seer tilted her head, as though listening to something only she could hear. The steppe brought you here for a reason. Kale's jaw tightened. I don't believe in destiny. Destiny does not require belief, she said. That it requires only time. Days passed. Kale was given a small space near the edge of camp, close enough to observe, far enough not to intrude. The nomads watched him with fascination and caution, but none approached aggressively. He spent his days traveling back and forth to the crash site, salvaging what he could. The beacon was beyond repair. The power core was fused into slag. But some components, plating, energy cells, auxiliary relays, might still be useful. Every night he returned to camp as the twin suns set and the Sapphire Steppe glowed under the rising twin moons. The plains came alive with bioluminescent insects, drifting like floating lanterns. Giant grazers bellowed far away, and the grass rippled like a glowing sea in the wind. On the fourth evening, as Kale sat near a fire pit stripping insulation from a ruined power conduit, Rhyla approached him. You work tirelessly, she observed. I don't have a choice. You do. All living things choose their path. Kale didn't look up. I'm a soldier. My path is duty. And if duty is impossible, he hesitated. I find another way. Rhyla gave a small nod. A sensible answer. Tell me, Kale Rylan, does your world know of the Vrax? Yes, he paused. We fought their kind before. Different species, same cruelty. Ryla's voice dropped. Then you know what happens to those they take. Kale's hands tightened around the conduit. Yes. Before he could say more, a deep, resonant hum rolled across the plains. It was not natural. It vibrated in his bones. Kale stood abruptly. Ryla's expression turned grim. They come. Kale followed her gaze to the sky. There, descending from the clouds like a drifting nightmare, was a massive vessel. Not a sleek ship, not a graceful craft, but a floating fortress of angular plates and pulsating biometal flesh. Chains of energy crackled beneath it, swaying like tendrils. Spikes protruded from its underside like teeth. The Vrax lords had arrived. Kale felt every muscle knot, but he did not move, did not rush, did not intervene. He was a soldier without orders, a man stranded on a world that was not his. The nomads gathered in trembling silence as the fortress passed overhead, casting a titanic shadow that rippled across the steppe. From its lowest decks, spherical drones detached, descending in slow arcs like predatory seeds. Rhyla whispered, "They search for villages, for slaves." Kale's throat tightened. "And you have no defenses?" "We run," she said simply. "But the steppe is wide, and they are tireless." Kale watched the fortress drift into the distance, his fists clenched, his blood boiled. But he stayed where he was. He had promised himself, repair the ship, survive, leave. Yet as he stared at the slaver's shadow disappearing over the horizon, he felt something inside him begin to crack. For now, he said nothing. But the steppe was patient, and fate was closing in. The days after the Vrax fortress sighting passed like whispered warnings carried on the wind. Kale worked at the crash site alone, his armor off, sleeves rolled up as he struggled with tools that weren't built for work in the field. Sweat beaded on his forehead, shining in the pale light of the second sun. Even with enhanced strength, parts of the wreck were fused beyond any hope of repair. The steppe, however, didn't care about his frustration. It moved with ancient serenity. Vast herds drifted across the horizon, their hoofbeats like rolling thunder. Crystal formations chimed faintly when the wind passed through their hollow cores. Strange avians soared overhead, wings shimmering like stained glass. Predators prowled the distant ridges, lithe, pale-furred shapes with curving horns and glowing amber eyes. Kale knelt beside the broken beacon, tools spread out in an improvised ritual of hopeless repair. Sparks snapped as he pried open a melted panel. Come on, he muttered. The circuitry inside was blackened charcoal. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Even for a career soldier, the weight of isolation pressed hard. He pulled his canteen from his belt, took a drink, and stared at the vast plains stretching beyond the ship's grave. The steppe was too quiet today. No distant calls, no humming insects. The wind itself felt cautious. Kale touched the hull gently, like a soldier honoring a fallen comrade. Just had to hold together another 10 minutes, he said softly. We could have made orbit. A shadow flickered across his periphery. Not threatening, curious. Rhyla approached on foot, her talcoon grazing behind her with its antlers catching blue light. You speak to your metal beast as though it were alive, she said. Kale wiped his hands on his pants. It kept me alive more times than I can count. Rhyla stepped closer, studying the wreckage. Will it fly again? Kale hesitated. No, not without parts I'll never find here. That saddens you. Wouldn't it sadden you? Kale replied, a hint of edge in his tone. Being cut off from everything you know? Ryla's expression softened. Yes, but you are not as alone as you think. Kale looked at her, surprised by the sincerity. She continued, the steppe watches over those who walk with open eyes. It has chosen not to devour you. That is a beginning. Kale snorted. That's comforting. Rhyla smiled faintly. Come, Elder Sergeant wishes to speak with you again. She says your presence stirs winds older than our clan. Kale felt tension crawl up his spine. I told her, I'm not here for prophecy. Prophecy is not here for you either, Kale Rylan, Rhyla said gently. It is here for Terenas. Inside the great tent, the air glowed with fragrant smoke from burning sapphire herbs. Patterns woven into the tent's walls depicted ancient battles, sprawling herds, and great sky serpents that no longer graced the steppe. Elder Sergeant sat cross-legged, her staff humming faintly as she traced shapes in the air, symbols Kale didn't recognize. She did not look up as he entered. You've seen the sky tyrants, she said. It was not a question. Kale nodded. Only from a distance. That is how they prefer to be seen. When they come close, there is no distance left to keep. Kale frowned. Your people have faced them before? Chidora exhaled deeply. Long ago, when my grandmother's grandmother was a child, the Vrax came from the void, drifting in their living machines, claiming they brought peace, but peace to them means chains. Rhyla stood beside Kale, arms folded. We drove them away once, at a heavy cost. Chitora's eyes turned to Kale at last. But their return, the patterns of the wind foretell suffering. Kale shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the spiritual tone. Look, he said, I'm sorry this is happening to your people, but I'm not your champion. I'm not here to fight a war. I'm here because I got shot out of orbit and landed in your backyard. Chitora smiled faintly, a patient, knowing smile. And yet you repaired not a weapon, but a conduit that helps light your campfires. Kale blinked. That wasn't for you. That was for me. Something to do with my hands. It does not matter why you did it, Chitora said. Only that you could do it, and chose to. Her gaze sharpened. Tell me truthfully, Kale Rylan, what do you fear? Kale opened his mouth, then stopped. What did he fear? Not battle, not pain, not even the Vrax, but the idea of being stranded forever, powerless to fulfill his oath-to-earth command. That quietly terrified him. He didn't answer. Chitora nodded knowingly. The Vrax returned because they sensed weakness. They test the steppe, seeking villages to break. If they find one unguarded, they will harvest it. Kale felt his stomach clench. And you think I'm supposed to stop that? He asked quietly. I think, Chitora said, that fate enjoys placing stones in the path of rivers. Kale frowned. Meaning? Meaning rivers must change course. Before Kale could respond, a low, rumbling horn sounded from outside, deep, resonant, and unmistakably urgent. Rhyla stiffened. Scouts returning. Something has happened. Kale's senses sharpened, instincts flaring, but still he held himself back. This was their world. Their fight. Not his. Not yet. Kale stepped out of the tent with Rhyla, joining the gathering crowd at the camp's perimeter. 2 scouts rode in at full speed, Talcoon hooves pounding the soil. Their cloaks were torn and dust streaked their faces. One slid from his saddle before the mount had fully stopped. His voice shook. It is gone. Chitora emerged from her tent, leaning heavily on her staff. What is gone? She demanded. The scout swallowed. The village of Vair, a day's ride west. When we arrived, it was nothing but ash. A hush fell over the camp. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ryla's face drained of color. The Vrax? They descended from the sky, the scout confirmed. The fortress you saw, it released tendrils of fire. We found no survivors. Kale felt his heart sink. He saw brief flashes in his mind. The slavers descending, people screaming, buildings burning, chains, smoke. Images burned into him from 100 worlds, 100 horrors he'd been created to fight. He closed his eyes. Not again. Not here. Rhyla stepped closer to Kale, voice barely above a whisper. You knew this would happen, didn't you? Kale clenched his jaw. I didn't want it to. We cannot stand against them, the scout said, trembling. Not as we are. Chitora approached, placing a hand on Kale's arm, her touch light but unyielding. You say you are not meant for prophecy, she murmured. Then consider this not prophecy, but reality. If the Vrax continue, every village on the Sapphire Steppe will become ash. Kale exhaled slowly, staring out across the glowing grasslands. The steppe looked so peaceful from afar, but now he saw the shadow stretching across it. He tried to tell himself this wasn't his problem, that he didn't belong here, that he needed to fix his ship. But the words felt hollow. Ryla's eyes met his, pleading but proud. What will you do, Kale Rylan? For a long moment he said nothing. The steppe wind shifted softly around him. The plains glowed under the rising moons. The distant sound of mourning rose from the villagers behind him. Finally, quietly, he answered, I'll go see what happened. Rhyla nodded once. Chitora closed her eyes in relief. The scouts exhaled. Kale's decision wasn't a pledge. It wasn't commitment. It wasn't destiny. But it was a step. The first step toward the path he had sworn he would avoid. Kale left the nomad camp at dawn. The suns had only begun their ascent, one bright gold and the other pale blue, casting long, shifting shadows over the Sapphire Steppe. Rhyla rode ahead on her Talcoon, while Kale walked on foot beside her, preferring to travel grounded. The steppe grasses brushed his thighs, glowing softly as the morning winds stirred them. Hours passed in relative silence. The plains felt different now, less alive, less musical. The usual hum of insects and the crystalline chimes of distant geode formations seemed muted, as if the land itself was bracing for something. Rhyla finally spoke. Why do you walk? Most off-worlders cling to mounts immediately. I trust my legs more than any animal, Kale replied. Besides, I need the time to think. Rhyla nodded, accepting the answer. They walked another hour before Kale noticed a faint discoloration on the horizon, a gray smudge where there should have been endless blue. It grew larger as they approached, and larger still. By midday, the smell reached them, an acrid mix of burned earth, metal, and something far worse. Rhyla slowed her talcune. We have entered the outskirts of Vare. Kale's gut tightened. The vibrant grasslands gave way to blackened patches of soil. The luminous grass was scorched to brittle stalks. Crystal formations lay shattered like broken teeth. Finally, they crested a low ridge and saw what remained of the village. Kale stopped cold. Where tents had once stood, only metallic ash remained, fine gray dust that shimmered with an oily sheen. Structures were melted into half-formed shapes, as though a great heat had liquefied them before the wind solidified their ruins. What did this? Kale whispered. Rhyla dismounted and joined him. The Vrax call them purge tendrils. They burrow into soil and ignite it from within. A single tendril can consume a village. Kale knelt, scooping some of the ash into his palm. It felt warm, too warm. This was recent, he murmured. Less than 2 days. Correct, Rhyla said. Kale's eyes scanned the ground with the precision of a trained soldier. No bodies, no remains, no debris typical of normal destruction. Where are the... He hesitated. Where are the villagers? Rhyla swallowed hard. The Vrax never leave bodies, she said quietly. What they do not burn, they take. Kale closed his fist around the ash until it sifted through his fingers. He stood slowly, jaw tightening. He wasn't ready to act. He wasn't ready to pick up a weapon. But for the first time since crash landing, he felt the old dangerous heat rise inside him. The heat Titan-framed soldiers were engineered to wield. Kale walked deeper into the ruins of Vare, moving past melted beams and crumbling outlines of once living spaces. The suns beat down on the charred earth, but Kale's armor regulated the temperature, keeping him steady. Rhyla followed several steps behind him, letting him take the lead. She could see the way his posture had shifted, shoulders squared, senses heightened, eyes scanning methodically. He was slipping into the mindset of a battlefield analyst. Here, Kale said suddenly, stopping beside what looked like a melted trough. Rhyla approached. The structure was barely recognizable. Kale pointed to a set of impressions in the ground, shallow, triangular patterns burned into the soil. Vrax footprints, he said. 6 toes, wide splay, heavy weight distribution, 200 kilos per adult. Rhyla frowned. You know their biology? I fought something similar before, Kale said, standing. They're not just tall, they're dense. Thick bones, overlapping muscle chains. Their armor plates merge with their skin, hard to break. Rhyla absorbed this in silence, then asked, Can your kind defeat them? Kale didn't answer immediately. Finally, trained soldiers can, if we have the right gear and enough of us. You are only one, she said softly. Yeah, Kale murmured. I know. They continued onward. Near the center of the ruins, Rhyla motioned for Kale to stop. She knelt beside a set of thin, winding trails etched into the ash. Kale crouched beside her. What are those? He asked. Ryla's expression darkened. Drag marks. The Vrax use energy nets. They coil around the limbs of the captured and pull them toward the skiffs. Kale's hands curled into fists before he realized it. He forced himself to breathe slowly. He was not here to fight. He was not part of their war. He was a soldier alone, stranded. But the ghostly path of the drag marks pulled at him. Rhyla rose to her feet and looked at him carefully. Your eyes change when you see their work. Kale blinked. Change how? Harder, she said, like someone who has already seen too many villages like this. Kale didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the west, toward the direction the drag marks led. Where do the Vrax take their captives? He asked quietly. Rhyla hesitated. To their floating fortresses, or to their ground forges where they break spirits and harvest minerals. Harvest? Kale echoed. Rhyla nodded. Terenas is rich with crystal ores. The Vrax feed them to their machines. Our people work until their bodies give way. Kale exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled release of anger. And no one has ever attacked one of these fortresses? Those who try, Rhyla said, never return. Kale stared at the horizon for a long moment, not committing, not promising, just seeing. As the suns drifted lower, Kale and Rhyla made camp just beyond the ruined village. The steppe wind carried the scent of scorched earth, but also something else, an ozone tang that Kale recognized immediately. He stood abruptly. "Do you smell that?" Rhyla sniffed the air. "Burned metal?" "Plasma residue," Kale corrected. "The Vrax fortress passed through here recently. Very recently." Ryla's expression tightened. "Do you think they still watch?" Kale scanned the skies. Terenas' sky was a strange tapestry that shifted with the angle of the suns. Wisps of glowing clouds drifted in sweeping spirals. Flocks of luminescent avians crossed the horizon like scattered constellations. But Kale saw something else, a shadow, barely visible. High above, cloaked by the refractive haze of the atmosphere, something vast drifted silently. Angular, organic, half machine and half beast, a floating fortress. And this one was much closer than before. Kale felt the back of his neck prickle. "They're observing," he said. "Maybe tracking survivors. Maybe just scouting new targets." Ryla's voice was a whisper. "We must return to the clan, warn them." Kale shook his head. "If we run, we'll look like prey. They'll follow." Rhyla glared. "So what do you suggest?" "Nothing," Kale said. "Not yet. Just keep moving as if we're nothing worth chasing. And if they choose otherwise?" Kale finally looked at her, eyes steady and grim. "Then I'll have to do something I've been trying very hard to avoid." Rhyla studied him for a long moment, reading the tension beneath the calm, the barely contained violence that lived inside the Titan-framed soldier. "You are not like our warriors," she said softly. "They burn bright and fall quickly. You burn deep, like a storm waiting for the right moment." Kale didn't answer. But as the floating fortress drifted silently across the twilight sky, he felt the first stirrings of a path he could no longer ignore. He was not ready to fight, but the world was pushing him toward it, step by step, village by village, shadow by shadow, and Terenas was running out of time. By the time Kale and Rhyla approached the clan's main encampment, dusk had covered the steppe in velvet purple light. The twin moons rose one after another. First the larger copper-hued orb, then the smaller silver shard that cast rippling reflections across the grass. The camp was not as they had left it. Fires burned lower, voices were hushed, children were kept inside the tents, warriors stood on the ridges with watchful eyes. The rumor had outrun them. Everyone now knew Ver was gone. Jatora waited at the center of the camp, seated beside a shallow bowl filled with glowing blue water. Patterns of light rippled across the surface, reflecting her sharp, aged features. Rhyla approached first, bowing her head. "Elder Seer, the village was ash. Everything the scout said is true." Jatora looked past her, straight at Kale. "And you, star-fallen soldier? What did you see?" Kale hesitated. He didn't want to scare these people, but he wouldn't lie either. "The Vrax purged the village," Kale said quietly. "Systematically, efficiently. They left nothing behind." Gasps rippled through the gathered nomads. Kale continued. "I tracked their movement. Their fortress is close, very close. They are watching from above." A murmur grew into anxious whispers. Rhyla raised her voice. "We must relocate. Break camp tonight, move east toward the deep steppes." Before Jatora could answer, a voice cut through the crowd. "Relocation is cowardice." A tall man stepped forward, broad-shouldered for a Terenan, with deep red markings on his face. His name was Vorran, a respected war hunter known for stubborn pride. He pointed directly at Kale. "This outsider brings fear. We did not tremble before the Vrax before. Why should we now? One ruined village is tragedy, not prophecy." Rhyla bristled. "You did not see what we saw, and you trust the word of a stranger?" Vorran snapped. "A man we found wandering from a burning sky?" Kale sighed. He really didn't want to be the center of this. Jatora rose slowly. "Vorran, the Vrax are a threat whether a stranger speaks or not." But Vorran shook his head, gesturing sharply. "I say we remain. The steppe protects its own, and we do not bow to fear." Kale stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "You don't understand what's coming." Vorran folded his arms. "Enlighten us, Sky Soldier." Kale met his gaze. "The Vrax don't raid for sport, they raid for control. You stay here, you're in their path." Murmurs spread again, some uncertain, others agreeing. Vorran's glare hardened. "You speak as though you know our land better than us." "I know slavers," Kale replied, "and these are worse." The crowd wavered, fear crept deeper. Jatora lifted her staff, its gem glowing softly. "Enough. We will discuss this under the moon's guidance." But as the crowd dispersed, two things were clear. The clan was divided, and Kale had become the fracture line. That night, the camp did not sleep. Wind swept across the Sapphire Steppe, carrying flecks of luminescence from the grasses. Fires flickered, shadows dancing against tent walls. The air held a tension like a coiled bowstring. Kale sat alone outside his assigned tent, tinkering with a salvaged ship fragment. Not because he thought it could be repaired. He knew it couldn't, but because doing something with his hands kept his mind still. Footsteps approached. Rhyla sat beside him, pulling her cloak close against the night chill. "You handled Vorran better than I expected," she said. "He's not wrong to question me," Kale replied. "I'm the outsider. Outsider or not, you've seen more war than any of us." Kale didn't answer. Rhyla studied him a moment. "You're different when you speak of the Vrax," she said quietly, as if they're a memory, not a threat. Kale's jaw tightened. "They remind me of others, ones I've fought, ones I've lost people to." "Your world suffered like Vair?" Kale exhaled. "My world has seen more burned towns than I care to remember." Rhyla nodded slowly, absorbing this. After a long silence, she said, "Jatora believes your arrival was no accident." Kale rubbed his temples. "I'm not your savior." "You may not be," Rhyla agreed, "but you could be our teacher, or our warning." Kale paused. "Do you believe that?" Rhyla gazed across the steppe, where distant luminescent insects drifted in slow spirals. "I believe Terenas is a living world," she said, "and that it guides those who walk with open eyes. You walk with eyes full of storms." Kale couldn't think of a reply. Instead, he stood, scanning the horizon out of instinct. Then, he froze. Far away, almost invisible, a faint pulse of orange light glimmered in the sky. Not a star, not lightning, something else. Ryla's breath caught. "Is that?" Kale nodded slowly. "A signal. Vrax ships use those pulses to communicate between vessels." "Then they are close," Rhyla whispered. "Closer than before." He watched the light flicker again. Short, sharp, repetitive, a pattern. "They're scanning the steppe," Kale murmured. "Mapping villages. They're preparing a sweep." Rhyla tensed. "Then the clan must move." Kale turned his head slightly toward her. "They won't listen to me, or you." "They might listen to action," she said. Kale folded his arms. "Action invites attention. Perhaps that is better than waiting for destruction." Kale looked back at the sky. "I'm not ready to fight your war." Rhyla didn't argue. She simply sat beside him in silence. Above them, the Vrax fortress drifted like a hungry shadow. And the steppe waited. At sunrise, the nomads gathered in the central ring, warriors, elders, herders, children clutching their parents' cloaks. The air buzzed with worry. The grass around the council circle shifted in agitated waves. Jatora stood at the center, her staff planted in the earth. The glow from its crystal tip pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "We must choose our path," she announced. "The Vrax draw near." Vorran strode forward immediately, shoulders squared. "I still say we stay. Moving the entire camp will exhaust our people. What if the Vrax pass us by?" A ripple of uneasy agreement spread through a portion of the crowd. Rhyla stepped forward next. "I saw Vair. I saw what the Vrax left. If they pass us by, it will be because they have taken everything." Vorran scoffed. "Fear makes you sound like a child." "Caution makes me sound alive," Rhyla fired back. Jatora lifted her hand. "Enough." All eyes turned to her. "Kale," she said softly, "you have seen other worlds fall to invaders. Speak." Kale felt every gaze turn toward him. He hated it. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a savior. He was a soldier with a broken ship. But he stepped forward anyway and spoke plainly. "The Vrax aren't raiders. They're conquerors. They don't burn a village because of opportunity. They burn it because it's part of a plan." The crowd listened, silent as stone. They scout, they pick targets, they strike quickly, and they don't stop until they control everything. A murmur rippled outward. Vorran crossed his arms. "Then you admit it, there is no point in running." Kale shook his head. "That's not what I said. If you stay, you'll die. If you move, you'll live long enough to plan." Vorran sneered. "Live long enough to plan for what? Hiding forever?" Kale stared him down. "Survival isn't cowardice, it's step one." "Step one toward what?" Vorran challenged. Kale hesitated. He didn't want to answer. Jatora's eyes bored into him. Finally, quietly, reluctantly, Kale said, "Toward choosing where you stand." The crowd absorbed his words like dry earth drinking rain. Not hopeful words, not heroic ones, but real, honest. Jatora nodded slowly. "We will break camp, move east. Vorran, you will lead the rear guard. Rhyla, you will guide the scouts." Vorran looked furious, but he obeyed. As the camp burst into motion, Rhyla approached Kale. "You changed their minds." Kale shook his head. "No, the Vrax did." Rhyla smiled sadly. "Then perhaps the Vrax serve their own purpose." Kale frowned. "What purpose?" "To bring you here." Kale said nothing. As the nomads began dismantling their glowing tents and the Sapphire Steppe shimmered under the morning light, Kale felt something shift inside him. Not acceptance. Not resolve. But the first hint of something he had tried desperately to avoid. Responsibility. The clan began its eastward departure at dawn. The Sapphire Steppe unfolded before them in waves of shimmering azure, the grasses glowing softly under the twin suns. Dozens of Talcun mounts moved in long, graceful lines. Their antlers caught the morning light like carved crystal. Wagons, pulled by hulking pack beasts, creaked beneath bundles of woven tents, dried food, and tools. Children clung to their mothers. Elderly nomads walked with steady determination. Kale traveled at the rear, alongside Vorran and a small group of warriors. He would have preferred solitude, but Jatora had insisted, "Those who walk behind see the shadows first." Vorran refused to speak to him. That suited Kale perfectly. The journey itself was mesmerizing. Clusters of shimmering spore flowers opened as the caravan passed, releasing drifting ribbons of bioluminescent pollen. Herds of tall, elegant grazers trotted beside them for a time before drifting away like schools of fish. The air smelled of grass, wind, and something faintly metallic, the scent of distant storm formations. Kale remained alert, watching, listening. Hours passed with no sign of danger, which worried him more than an attack would have. The Vrax were never idle. Their fortresses rarely drifted without purpose. As the suns reached their zenith, Rhyla rode back from the vanguard to join Kale. "How does the rear fare?" she asked. Kale shrugged. "Quiet." "Too quiet?" she asked knowingly. Kale nodded once. Rhyla gazed toward the northern horizon, where wisps of strange clouds swirled in spiraling formations. "My grandmother used to say," she murmured, "that the steppe grows silent before grief arrives." Kale didn't reply, but he understood. The silence around them felt like a living thing, a warning. A pause before a blade's descent. By mid-afternoon, the caravan reached a region of the steppe where the grass grew shorter and pale streaks of silver wove through the soil like veins. Crystal spires towered overhead, massive, leaning structures that chimed softly whenever the wind passed. Rhyla guided the caravan carefully around these formations. "They are the shard fields," she explained. "The oldest part of the steppe. The ground here holds memories." Kale frowned. "Memories?" Rhyla smiled faintly. "You would call them energy echoes, imprints of events long past." Kale's visor confirmed her words. Faint traces of thermal discharge, residual plasma, electromagnetic disturbances. Something violent had happened here once. As they traveled between two massive crystal towers, a Talcun mount suddenly snorted and reared. Its handler struggled to control it, but the beast refused to move forward. Rhyla dismounted immediately, kneeling beside a patch of disturbed soil. "Kale?" she called. He joined her and saw it instantly. Drag marks, fresh, different from the village, more frantic, chaotic. The soil was churned deeply in several places, signs of struggle. Vorran approached, scowling. "Animals fight. These marks mean nothing." "No," Kale said quietly. "These are human. Terenas, someone was taken." Rhyla swallowed hard. "A family. Look, 4 sets of trails." Kale traced the impressions with his fingers. Smaller ones, children, dragged forcibly toward the east. His chest tightened. "They're close," he murmured. "We're practically in the Vrax's shadow." Rhyla looked around nervously. "We should warn the clan, change course." But Kale remained crouched, analyzing the patterns. "This wasn't a full raid," he said. "A scouting skiff. Quick strike. They didn't burn anything. Just snatched whoever they could reach." Vorran huffed. "Then we move even faster." "And move right into their net?" Kale snapped. Vorran bristled. "We follow Jatora's chosen path. The steppe guides us." Kale rose to his full height, towering over him. "The steppe doesn't know the Vrax the way I do." Before their argument could escalate, a thin cry echoed across the wind, a sound so faint Kale almost dismissed it. A child's voice, weak, barely audible. Rhyla gasped, "Someone survived." Vorran stiffened. "Or it is bait." Kale didn't wait to debate. He moved. One moment he was standing with the caravan, the next he was sprinting into the grass, the bioluminescent blades parting like water as he ran. Rhyla shouted after him, "Kale, wait!" But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not when he heard that cry. Kale followed the faint cries, his enhanced hearing tracking the echoes as he weaved between towering crystal pillars. Light refracted across his path in shifting bands of blue, purple, and gold. The ground sloped downward into a hollow, a natural basin ringed with jagged crystal shards, shaped like the ribs of some colossal long-dead creature. At the center, he found her. A small girl, no older than 6, collapsed beside a shattered shard formation. Her clothes were torn, covered in ash and dirt. Her braid was half unraveled, and her silver eyes were glazed with exhaustion. She didn't see Kale at first. She just whispered, hoarse and trembling, "Help, please." Kale approached slowly, lowering himself to her level. "It's all right," he murmured. "I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched at the sound of his voice, eyes widening in fear. "You're big." Kale softened his tone. "I know, but I'm here to help." He looked around, signs of struggle everywhere, energy residue still warm. The Vrax skiff couldn't be far. Carefully, Kale lifted the girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. She pressed her face into his chest, gripping his shirt sleeve with tiny fingers. "They took my brother," she whispered. "Ankesh, they took him." Kale felt something inside him go cold. A memory flashed, fire raining from the sky, his sister ripped away by invaders, a boy powerless to stop it. He swallowed hard. Rhyla and Vorran arrived seconds later, breathless from the chase. Rhyla gasped. "By the moons," Vorran cursed under his breath. "What happened?" Rhyla asked gently. Kale answered for the girl. A Vrax scout skiff grabbed her brother. She must have escaped the net. The girl looked up with teary silver eyes. "They'll hurt him, won't they?" Rhyla knelt, brushing hair from the child's face. "We will protect you now." But the girl shook her head. "They'll come back," she whispered. "They always come back." Kale's grip tightened around her. He looked at Rhyla, then at Vorran, then at the horizon, where he knew without question the Vrax fortress drifted just beyond sight. He had tried to avoid this, tried to stay out of their war. But as he held the trembling child in his arms, Kale felt the truth settle like stone in his gut. There would be no avoiding it anymore. Rhyla saw the shift in his expression. "Kale, what are you thinking?" Kale exhaled slowly, eyes turning flint-hard. "I think it's time," he said quietly, "that we stop running." The wind swept across the hollow, carrying the scent of distant fire. And for the first time, Kale Rylan, star-fallen soldier, crash survivor, reluctant outsider, felt the first spark of the legend he would become. Wrathborn. They carried the child back to camp before nightfall. The clan gathered in silence as Rhyla eased the girl from Kale's arms into those of a waiting elder. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Warriors clenched their spears. Vorran stood rigid, jaw flexing. Jatora approached slowly, her staff glowing faintly in the blue dusk. "I felt her fear before you reached the ridge," she said. "Her arrival is a warning." Kale folded his arms. "It's more than a warning." Rhyla nodded. "The Vrax have scout nets sweeping the plains." The Elder Seer's expression tightened with sorrow. "Then our time grows short." Kale inhaled, steadying his voice as countless calculating instincts clicked into place. "We can't keep moving blindly," he said. "The Vrax don't chase you, they herd you, like prey." Several warriors bristled at the implication. Kale raised a hand. "I'm not insulting you. I'm telling you what they do to every civilization they target. Your movement patterns, the direction of the wind, the positions of crystal formations, they're using all of it to map your possible escape routes." Ryla's eyes widened. "Then any path we choose, they already know." "Likely," Kale said. "Unless we change the pattern entirely." The clan murmured. Jatora stepped forward, staff humming with tension. "Speak, Kale." He pointed east. "That direction leads to open ground, no cover. If you go there, they'll net you like a migrating herd." He then pointed toward the south, toward a jagged line of darker shapes on the horizon. "The Reaver Cliffs," Rhyla whispered. Kale nodded. "Exactly." Vorran stepped forward angrily. "You would lead us into the Reavers?" "The cliffs cut the land. The winds there are violent. Shards from the crystal faces fall during storms. Even our Talcum fear those lands." Kale met his glare evenly. "The Vrax can't navigate them. Their skiffs rely on stable air currents. If you want to avoid capture, that's where you go." Rhyla looked at Kale with a mixture of fear and respect. "You speak like someone who has studied them." "I've fought worse," Kale said quietly. "I know how their minds work." Chetora nodded slowly. The cliffs are dangerous, but danger we can see is better than danger from the sky. Vorran scowled. We lose people crossing those cliffs. Kale stepped closer to him, voice low but steady. You'll lose everyone if you stay on open ground. I'm telling you the truth you don't want to hear. Vorran stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. Rhyla broke the silence. If we leave before dawn, we can reach the first rise by midday. Chetora planted her staff firmly into the soil. We go south. A murmur rippled across the camp, fear mixed with hope. Kale stepped back, the decision made. This wasn't his tribe. This wasn't his world. Yet his words had altered the course of hundreds of lives. He felt the weight of that settle across his shoulders like an unwelcome cloak. Rhyla approached him, voice soft. You didn't have to speak up. Kale exhaled. Yes, I did. They broke camp in the dim hours before dawn, when the Sapphire Steppe was at its most luminous. The grasses glowed in rolling waves, bioluminescent motes drifting upward like lost spirits in the chill air. The clan moved quietly, tension tightening every voice and footstep. Talcoon mounts snorted nervously. Children clung to parents. Warriors rode at the outer ring, their spears trembling despite their pride. Kale took up position on a ridge overlooking the caravan. He scanned the sky every few minutes. Not for stars, but for shapes, shadows, movements, signals. The first sign came just after sunrise. A flicker, a soft pulse of orange light. Kale froze. Another pulse, then another. A Vrax long-range signal. Kale, Rhyla whispered, riding toward him. What is it? He pointed to the sky. The second sun caught something metallic above the clouds, just for an instant. A floating shape, vast, predatory, silent. Then it vanished back into the haze. Ryla's face went pale. They're watching. More than watching, Kale said. They're marking your movement. If they deploy nets, we won't see them until they're already descending. Rhyla swallowed. Then what do we do? Kale didn't blink. We keep moving, but quietly. No fires, no noise, no sudden changes in direction unless absolutely necessary. As the caravan marched south, the shadow overhead moved with them, slow, unhurried, patient, like a vulture circling a wounded animal. Kale's skin crawled. He had seen this kind of watchfulness before. It meant the Vrax were not ready to strike, not yet. They were waiting for the perfect moment. As the day stretched on, the sky grew darker. Not with clouds, but with haze, a strange shimmering curtain that distorted the sun's light. The wind shifted direction, bringing an electric sting that pricked at Kale's senses. We're getting close to the Reaver Cliffs, Rhyla said. Kale nodded. And then, a sudden gust, not natural, more like a displacement of air. A large one. Kale whipped his head upward. A shape emerged from the haze. Long, angular, silent. A Vrax skiff, small, fast, built for snatching stragglers, descending slowly in observation mode. Kale's pulse tightened. Rhyla gasped. They've spotted us. They already knew where we were, Kale said. This is confirmation. Vorran galloped to join them, spear ready. We strike the skiff now, he barked. Kale grabbed Vorran's arm, stopping him cold. No, if you attack, they'll mark you as hostile, then they'll bring the fortress. Vorran snarled. We do nothing? Let them hover above us like carrion beasts? Yes, Kale said firmly. Until we have an advantage. You fight on your terms, not theirs. Rhyla looked between them, voice trembling. What do we tell the clan? Kale stared at the hovering skiff, its tendrils faintly glowing as it scanned the plains. Tell them to stay close, he said, and to keep moving. Toward the cliffs? Rhyla asked. Toward the cliffs, Kale confirmed. And whatever happens, stay behind me. The skiff drifted lower, watching, tracking, waiting. Kale felt every fiber of his enhanced nerves coil. Not yet. Not yet. Not. They reached the base of the Reaver Cliffs by late afternoon. The cliffs were massive, towering walls of black crystal and jagged stone. Shards protruded like obsidian spears, reflecting the suns in sharp, dazzling bursts. The air here was different, charged with static, humming with unseen energy currents. Talcoon mounts balked at the entrance to the narrow pass. Easy, Rhyla whispered, stroking her mount's neck. Easy. But the animals sensed danger. The caravan slowed, bunched together, perfect for a capture. Kale's heart hammered. He turned sharply toward the sky. The Vrax skiff had descended lower, much lower. Its underside opened, revealing the faint shimmer of ensnarement nets, the same energy constructs that had taken the girl's brother. Oh no, Rhyla whispered. Kale. Vorran snarled. If we don't act now? The The skiff emitted a low, rising hum, a net deployment signature. Kale muttered, "That's it." He stepped forward. No sword, no spear, no armor beyond his fatigues and the reinforced bones beneath his skin. But he no longer cared. The skiff dipped closer. Energy tendrils flared, and Kale moved. Not a charge, not a reckless leap, just a single deliberate step forward, then another. Kale stood between the caravan and the descending skiff. Ryla's voice cracked. "Kale, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He planted his feet in the luminous grass, raised his chin, and stared up at the Vrax machine like a man daring a storm to strike him. The skiff hesitated. For the first time, it hesitated. Something about the way he stood, unmoving, unafraid, defiant, caused the skiff's tendrils to flicker uncertainly. The air crackled. The hum wavered. Rhyla gasped. "They're confused." "No," Kale murmured. "They're calculating." Vorran stared at him with wide eyes. "What are you?" Kale didn't look away from the skiff. "A soldier," he said quietly, "built to kill monsters bigger than them." The skiff descended another meter. Kale didn't blink. Then, a thunderous crack split the air. A lightning shard from the cliffs shot upward, an unpredictable natural discharge common to the Reaver cliffs, and struck the skiff's side. The machine reeled, wobbling, tendrils retracting. Its hum faltered. A second discharge hit, then a third. The skiff jerked violently upward, alarms shrieking in its reptilian pilot's tongue, and it fled. Straight back into the haze, away from the cliffs, away from the caravan, away from Kale. The steppe fell silent. The clan stared at him, hundreds of eyes reflecting shock, awe, fear, and something else. Rhyla whispered the word first, "Wrathborn." Kale turned sharply toward her. "No, I'm not." But the clan had already started whispering, repeating, passing it from voice to voice like a spark catching dry grass. "Wrathborn, Wrathborn, Wrathborn." Vorran bowed his head. Jatora approached, her staff glowing softly. "You took your first stand today, Kale. The steppe has named you." Kale shook his head, overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything. The cliffs are part of the world," Jatora said, "and the world moved with you." Kale exhaled shakily. He didn't feel like a savior, or a hero, or a myth. He felt like a man who had reached the limit of what he could ignore. And for the first time since landing on Terenas, he knew the path forward would not allow him to turn away again. The entrance to the Reaver cliffs yawned before them like the maw of a slumbering titan. Jagged formations of black crystal jutted upward at impossible angles, some leaning so far they touched tips overhead, forming natural arches that glittered with reflected light. The air was cooler here, charged with electricity. Each breath carried a faint metallic tang. The clan hesitated at the threshold. Talcoon mounts stamped nervously, wagons creaked. Children whimpered softly as their parents tightened their grips. Rhyla dismounted and walked toward Kale, her eyes glowing in the dim light. "Are you certain of this path?" she asked. Kale stared into the labyrinth of stone. "It's the only one the Vrax won't risk." Rhyla nodded. "Then we follow." The caravan entered. Immediately the sound changed. The open wind of the steppe became a chorus of echoes, distant, warbling, as though the cliffs whispered through narrow channels carved by centuries of storms. Shards of crystal caught the light in sudden, brilliant flashes. At one point, Kale noticed strange patterns etched into the rock, long vertical lines that spiraled, intersecting with triangular symbols. "What are these?" he asked. Rhyla touched one gently. "Old paths, stories cut by ancestors during the First War of the Steppe." Kale frowned. "War? With the Vrax?" "No," Rhyla said. "Something older, something we drove away so completely that its name was forgotten." Kale studied the carvings more closely. The symbols vaguely resembled something reptilian. A chill brushed his spine. Vorran snorted. "Ghost stories, nothing more." But Kale wasn't convinced. The deeper they went, the stranger the cliffs became. Walls vibrated with a low hum. Sparks of static leapt between stones. Sometimes, streaks of lightning traveled horizontally, crackling between crystalline protrusions. The warriors grew restless. One of the elders whispered, "These cliffs reject those who fear." Kale wasn't sure fear was the right word for what he felt. He'd walked through battlefields strewn with titans, spaceships torn apart by orbital bombardments, but these cliffs felt alive. Watching, waiting, scanning, as if assessing whether he belonged. The caravan moved slowly but steadily, and then the wind changed. Not a breeze, a shift, a reversal of air currents swirling backward through the canyon. Kale lifted his head sharply. "Storm surge," he murmured. Before he could warn the others, a blast of wind slammed against the passage, rattling the wagons and startling the Talcoon. Loose shards plummeted from above, exploding into fragments against the ground. "Move!" Kale shouted, grabbing a falling shard with his bare hand and hurling it aside. Rhyla and Vorran rallied the warriors, guiding the mounts through the narrowest sections before the storm could trap them. Static lightning arced above, illuminating the cliffs with flashes of ghostly blue. Kale shielded the small girl, the one they had rescued, as debris whipped through the air. She clung to his leg, trusting him completely. When the surge finally subsided, the caravan had survived. But everyone looked shaken. Everyone, except Kale. He stared deeper into the cliffs, jaw clenched. If the Vrax followed them here, they would die, and so would the clan. Word traveled faster than the wind. Before the caravan had even cleared the first layer of the cliffs, whispers spread. Kale stood against the skiff. Kale turned away the nets. Kale walked unflinching under the slaver's gaze. Children peeked from behind their parents, legs to stare at him with wide, awestruck eyes. Elders bowed slightly when he passed. Warriors murmured to one another, glancing his way with newfound reverence or resentment. Rhyla walked beside him with an amused look. "You don't seem to enjoy being admired," she observed. Kale frowned. "I don't like being misrepresented." "You didn't see what we saw, Kale. The Vrax's machine descended for capture. And you." She searched for the right words. "You became like a stone the storm could not move." "That's not power," Kale said quietly. "That's instinct." "Instincts shape legends," Rhyla answered. Kale exhaled sharply. "I'm not a legend." "Not yet," she said. He shot her a glare. She grinned slightly. But as they wove deeper into the twisting spine of the Reaver Cliffs, Kale could feel the weight of their belief pressing against him. A belief he didn't want. A belief he feared would get people killed. Vorran approached, walking on Kale's other side. His tone was grudging but respectful. "You stood alone," Vorran admitted. "Most men would have fled." Kale didn't look at him. "Most men weren't created to fight things twice their size." Vorran blinked, taken aback. "Created?" he echoed. Kale realized he'd spoken too bluntly, but it was too late. Rhyla watched him carefully. "What does that mean, Kale?" Kale stared at the jagged cliffs ahead. "I'm not like you. I wasn't born for peace. Earth built me, modified me for war. I'm a Titan-frame soldier. My bones are reinforced. My muscles can handle impacts that would kill normal people. I heal faster. I endure longer. I was engineered to stand against monsters." Rhyla and Vorran both fell silent. Finally, Rhyla asked softly, "Does it hurt?" Kale blinked. "Does what hurt?" "To live as a weapon." Kale didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. He just walked, letting the silence swallow the question. By late afternoon, the cliffs widened into a plateau, a vast open shelf with towering stone ruins jutting from its surface. They resembled ancient pillars, eroded to skeletal remains, each one carved with the same spiraling symbols Kale had noticed earlier. The clan began setting up a temporary rest area. Warriors stood watch. Children gathered glowing stones along the cliffside. Kale scanned the sky instinctively. A gust of cold wind brushed the plateau. "Kale?" Ryla's voice came from behind him. "You're tense." He didn't respond. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He stepped forward, squinting upward. Above the cliffs, the haze shifted. Slowly, too slowly. Something massive churned behind it, distorting the atmosphere. Then, a low droning vibration rolled across the plateau. Not thunder, not wind. Kale's blood froze. "A fortress," he whispered. Rhyla stumbled to his side. "No, not here. Not this close." Kale's enhanced sight pierced the haze just enough to see it. A colossal Vrax fortress, descending. Its silhouette blotted out the second sun, turning the plateau into twilight. Chains of light dangled from its underside, twitching like hungry tendrils. Vorran yelled from the rear of the caravan. "Positions! Guard the children!" The clan scrambled. Panic spread fast, but Kale remained still, calculating, measuring. The fortress was not deploying nets, not deploying tendrils. It was scanning. Kale recognized the pattern. "This is a pre-sweep," he growled. "They're mapping the terrain, choosing the best position to deploy from." "Can we run?" Rhyla asked. "No," Kale said. "Not fast enough." "Can we hide?" Kale looked at the clan, then at the towering stone ruins. "Yes," he said. He turned to Vorran. "Get everyone into the ruins. Now. The stone will scatter their scans." Break into groups of 20. Spread out. Move. Rhyla didn't question him. She ran to help rally the clan. Vorran hesitated only a moment before shouting orders. Kale stood alone as the Vrax fortress drifted lower, its hum vibrating the plateau stones. Its belly opened like a great metal maw. Scanning beams swept the cliffside. Kale stepped deliberately into the center of the plateau and looked up at the descending fortress without fear. He took a slow breath. He knew what he had to do. Not to win. Not to fight. Not yet. Just to survive long enough to get these people out alive. As the fortress loomed overhead like a monstrous living eclipse, Kale whispered to himself, "All right, then. Come scan me." The air trembled, the light swept toward him, and everything changed. The Vrax fortress hovered directly above the plateau. Its underside was a horrifying marriage of biology and machinery, plated metal segments shifting like scales, woven with tendons of glowing blue bioflesh. Fissures pulsed with sickly amber light, and far within its cavernous interior, something massive slithered in shadow. Kale stood alone on the open stone, a single human form beneath a colossus. The fortress let out a deep, resonant hum. Thrum! The sound vibrated Kale's bones. A radiant orange circle appeared on the ground around him, a scanning ring the width of a small house. The air crackled. Dust lifted off the ground in drifting spirals. Rhyla, hiding among the stone ruins, whispered, "He stands there like he was carved out of the cliff." Vorran muttered, "If the Vrax strike, he will die." "No," Rhyla whispered, "he will endure." The scanning ring tightened. Kale felt the hair on his arms rise as energy needles probed the metal of his dog tags, the alloy of his boots, the reinforced lining of his bones. He closed his eyes, steady and unmoving. "Scan me, then," he murmured. "Let's see what you think of a Titan frame." High above, a cluster of crystalline nodes on the fortress surface changed color, shifting from orange to deep, flickering crimson. Rhyla gasped. "What does that mean?" Kale's eyes snapped open. He knew exactly what it meant. "It means," Kale whispered, "they've realized I'm not native." The fortress hissed, an alien mechanical shriek that rippled through the air. Then the hum changed pitch, lower, more urgent. A voice, reptilian and metallic, crackled from hidden speakers, speaking a guttural language. Kale recognized enough to understand two words: off-worlder. Priority. The fortress had just identified him as a threat category, not a nuisance, not a bystander. A threat. Kale's heart hammered. He'd been trying to avoid this, trying to remain invisible. And now, he had the Vrax's full attention. A piercing lance of light erupted downward from the fortress, not an attack, but a deeper scan. It enveloped Kale in shimmering layers, reading his skeleton, muscle density, neural implants, and genetic modifications. Kale grit his teeth. He could feel the probe pushing into every augment his body held. Rhyla clutched the stone ruin, whispering, "What are they doing to him?" Chitora, hidden behind a crystalline pillar with the clan's children, answered quietly, "They are learning his nature." The scanning beam intensified. Kale's augmented muscles locked to keep from collapsing. Images flashed through his visor's HUD. Warning, external analysis attempting to override sequence primus rejected. Warning, subdermal implants detected by hostile sensor grid rejected. The Vrax would discover everything about him in seconds. His strength, his origin, his enhancements, his tactical value, and most dangerously, his potential. The beam suddenly shut off. Silence. Then, a pulse from the fortress, like a monstrous heartbeat. Rhyla whispered, "That sound, what does it mean?" Kale's face hardened. "It means they're calling for reinforcements." The fortress responded to his existence in a way he had hoped never to witness again. It initiated a classification protocol. In the Vrax lexicon, Titan frame soldiers fell under a single category, Nemesis class. A threat so significant that combat engagement was no longer optional, it was required. "Kale," Rhyla breathed, "what did they see in you?" "Enough," Kale said, "that they won't let us leave this plateau." High above, the fortress began to lower, slowly, deliberately. Its massive chains of light scraped the air like living tendrils, preparing for deployment. Kale exhaled sharply. "Everyone stay hidden," he said. "And no matter what happens, don't run." "Why not?" Vorran whispered sharply. "Because the Vrax hunt movement," Kale said. "If the clan flees, they'll be netted before they reach the cliffs." Rhyla whispered. "Then what do we do?" Kale scanned the fortress and answered coldly, "We make them think we're gone." Kale sprinted from the open plateau into the nearest cluster of stone ruins. Rhyla and Vorran met him, breathless. Rhyla grabbed his arm. "What's your plan?" Kale scanned the ruins. Towering stone columns, broken archways, and clusters of crystal that hummed with residual lightning. "I need the Vrax to lose track of us," Kale said. "Right now their sensors have a perfect reading on the plateau." Vorran scoffed. "How do you hide an entire clan?" Kale motioned to the stone structures. "These rocks, they distort energy. I noticed it on the way in. They scatter signals." Jatora stepped forward, nodding. "This is why our ancestors built shrines here. The cliffs hide things the sky cannot see." "Yes," Kale said, "but we need something more." He pointed toward a narrow slope leading downward. A natural trench, shielded from above by overhanging stone teeth. "Everyone needs to move into that trench, quietly, slowly. Rhyla, Vorran, guide them. Keep the children in the center." Rhyla nodded immediately. Vorran hesitated only a moment before following. "And you?" Rhyla asked. Kale looked back toward the plateau where he had stood moments before. "I'm going to give the Vrax something else to track." Ryla's eyes widened. "Kale, no, they marked you. They will strike you." "That's the point," he said quietly. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "This is not your fight." Kale met her gaze. "No, but if I don't do this, your people die." He turned and sprinted back toward the plateau, moving fast, deliberately fast, to draw attention. "Kale," Rhyla called after him. He didn't look back. The fortress overhead rotated, tracking his motion. Tendrils of energy writhed beneath it. A grinding metallic shriek echoed across the cliffs. The fortress was targeting him. Kale slid to a stop in the open. He extended both arms outward. "Come on," he muttered. "Focus on me." The fortress obliged. A beam of searing orange light lanced downward, striking the stone where he stood. But Kale dove aside at the last moment, rolling behind a massive pillar. The stone exploded in a shower of shards. Kale sprinted again, purposely erratic, zigzagging through the ruins, staying always just visible enough to keep the fortress engaged. Behind him, the clan slipped into the trench, vanishing from sight. Rhyla watched him from the edge of the ruins, whispering, "Storm-eyed warrior, what burns inside you?" Kale vaulted over a fallen pillar, muscles burning, lungs drawing controlled breaths. A second beam struck inches behind him, a third, a fourth, but Kale kept moving. He was buying time, drawing fire, saving them all. When the clan disappeared into the trench and the last child had slipped out of sight, Kale finally stopped running. He stood atop a broken obelisk, tall enough for the fortress to see him clearly. He raised both arms again and yelled, "I'm right here." The fortress roared. All its beams converged. Fade to black. The cliffside shook. And Kale Rylan, Deathworlder soldier, reluctant guardian, and the man the steppe was beginning to call Wrathborn, vanished beneath the storm. The moment the fortress fired its converged beams, the world erupted in fire. A column of searing orange light engulfed the shattered obelisk. Stone liquefied, crystal shattered. The entire cliffside trembled under the force of alien technology designed not for destruction, but for capture through compulsion. A method of overwhelming a target with sensory and neural disruption. The blast threw Kale backward like a rag doll. He slammed through a curtain of hanging crystal shards, each one razor-sharp. His reinforced skin split in several places. Blood sprayed across his vision. He hit the ground hard, hard enough that a normal human spine would have snapped instantly. Kale's augmented skeleton held, barely. His breath choked in his throat. He forced air back into his lungs, coughing on dust and blood as the world spun. Above him, the fortress shrieked. Tendrils of biometal whipped downward, probing the smoke. Searching, Kale rolled his body under a fallen slab of crystal just seconds before a tendril stabbed into the ground where he had been. He gritted his teeth. "I can't let them take me alive." He reached up and snapped off a shard of crystal sharp as a dagger. If the Vrax managed to bind him, he would rather. Another tendril crashed down beside him, inches away. He froze. ScanNet deployment failed. Biosignature unstable. Target location lost. The alien voice reverberated inside his skull. Not words he heard. Words he sensed, as if the scan was trying to reach into his neural implants. Kale jolted, feeling the invasive pressure pushing against his mind. "No," he growled through clenched teeth. He rammed the shard into the stone beside him and severed the contact point on his wrist cuff. breaking the line the Vrax sensor grid had been using to anchor its scan. Pain erupted through his arm as sparks flew. The fortress spasmed. Its tendrils whipped wildly, unable to relock onto him. Its shrieks grew more urgent. Target lost. Reacquire, reacquire, reacquire. Kale pressed himself deeper onto the crystal slab as the fortress drifted lower, scanning frantically. Every vibration rattled his bones. Dust rained from above. Then, a distant rumble. Wind changed direction. Lightning crackled along the upper cliffs. The natural static of the Reaver cliffs surged, energy bursting through the stone like veins of living light. The fortress jerked upward violently, recoiling from the electrical current that danced across its hull. The machine growled, frustrated. Then slowly, reluctantly, it drifted away. Kale didn't move, not at first, not until the fortress shrank into a distant silhouette. Even then, he stayed still, exhausted, bleeding, half-blinded, alive. Barely. Join us in part 2 to see how the saga ends. Thanks for listening, and remember to like and subscribe.